This is Join Us in France, episode 173. This episode is brought to you by Patreon supporters and Addicted to France, the tour company that specializes in small group tours and custom tours in France. There is going to be a 24-hour sale on Black Friday, and I'll tell you more about that after the interview. Bonjour, I'm Annie, and on today's show, I chat with William Ciardiello on how he became friends with a family in Corsica and how they showed him around this wonderful French island in the Mediterranean that we've never talked about on the show yet, and I've been to, and Elise has even lived on. You'll see, they showed him such a great time. They showed him all the best places on Corsica. For the extra content this week, I'll send out a new classic French dish recipe card, since many people told me they loved the last one, so I'll do more of that. And now, here's the interview. Hello, William, and welcome to Join Us in France.
Hi, Annie. It's great to be with you.
Oh, lovely to talk to you. Thank you for reaching out and telling me about these wonderful places you visited that you want to share about on the podcast. So I think we're going to do 2 episodes today because you have visited extensively 2 areas of France. Corsica is the first one. And then on another episode, we'll talk about Picardy, which are both really interesting places. So,
they sure are.
Yeah. So to get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what led you to visit those lovely places?
It's a little bit of a long story, but I'll try to shorten it as best I can, Annie. I'm retired. I retired from a professional career in sales with 3 Fortune 500 companies. And I look for things to do. And one Friday, I was going to our local farmers market to pick up vegetables, tomatoes, and so on in season. And there was a booth there from an organization called Education First, and they were looking for host families to host teenage students coming in from Europe and from China and Hong Kong.
Oh, how nice.
And I went over to the booth. I talked to the young man there, and they said that they were up against the deadline. They had 4 students to place for the following week. They were going to stay in New Jersey, which is the New York metropolitan area where I live, for about 3.5 weeks. So I looked, I talked, and then I walked away. And I said to myself, someday you should do this.
Yeah,
and then the other voice in my head chimed in and said, if you don't do it now, you're never going to do it. So I turned around and
that's
they had
probably true, That's true of a lot of things.
They had 4 little postage stamp sized pictures, and one of the students was from France. And I've always had an affinity for France and Italy. And I looked and I said to the guy, I said, okay, I'll take the French kid. And
you must have been really happy.
Yeah, I went to the farmers markets for tomatoes. I tell everybody I came back with a French student.
With a French kid.
Right. So the following week he came. His name was Tanguy. He's from the French Alps in a small town called Morzine. Yeah. And I had such a great experience with him, bonded so well with him. Fantastic 3.5 weeks. They spend the whole day in school at a local university where they rent out the space. They spend the mornings in English class, because it's an English immersion American culture program. And the afternoon, they usually take them to some different sites in New York City. Yeah. And then at night or on the weekends, I add in where the organization doesn't take them to places in New York City like the World Trade Center, the museum, the High Line, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, different places. I usually ask them for a list. I send their families an email to give them an idea of what their trip was like. And I often get invited to come over to France and to see them and be with them.
Isn't that cool?
And so a couple of years pass. I host 2 more boys. And last year, I hosted a young boy, 14 years old, from Bastia in Corsica.
Oh, that's harder because that's young.
Yeah, it was young. And his English was not as on par with the others because they had a couple more years experience. So his confidence in the English, it took a few days for him to gain his confidence to speak, but he did.
Yeah,
Again, we bonded.
I've taught English to 14-year-old French kids, and let me tell you, I know what you mean. Yeah. It's hard to get anything out of them sometimes.
Yeah, we bonded really, really well. And then when he left, as soon as he got on the plane, he started to text me about how much he missed me. And you have to come to Corsica. You have to come to Corsica. So I sent an email to his dad, and his dad replied and invited me. And I replied back and said, yeah, well, next time I come to France, maybe I can run down there for 2 or 3 days. And the reply I got back was 2 or 3 days is not enough. You must spend at least a week in Corsica. It's a big island. You have to see all of it. So I went to Paris, and then we went to Nice. Then we took the ferry from Nice to Corsica, and then I flew back up to Paris and then spent the last week in Picardy.
Very nice.
So, Luca, both families, I wrote to them and just asked them for hotel recommendations that would be convenient for them. And both of them wrote back and said, no way.
You're staying with us.
Our houses are big enough. You're staying with us. I mean, it was just no questions. That's the way it's going to be.
Yeah.
And I didn't really know what to expect. And my idea of Corsica was that it was this island in the Mediterranean. It was near Sardinia. I didn't really know much about it. I looked up a few things. The boy brought a book about Corsica as a gift to me. So I looked through that, a travel book. And it looked like a very unusual place, which it turned out to be.
It is, yeah.
And so I really didn't know what to expect. I thought I'd be laying around on the beach because it's all beaches, and not really knowing, maybe exploring the town of Bastia, which is a relatively small town compared to what I'm used to. It's about 330,000 people.
Right.
And I live in a metropolitan area of about 10 million. Yeah. So to me, I figured, all right, I'll just relax. I'll spend, it's not bad to go on a vacation and not do anything, just relax and be with the kid and play ball, because he really fell in love with baseball. So we get there. The family is 4 people: Carl, Dion, are the mother and father, and Luca and his little sister, Lil one, is 8 years old. And we got off the ferry. It was a 4-hour ferry ride from Nice to Bastia. And it was a nice ferry ride, about $60. It wasn't expensive. It also takes vehicles, but we didn't use a car.
Right.
So we got off the boat and we made our way to the entry, and there was Luca and his dad, smiling faces, waving, and you could tell that the greeting was genuine, the welcome was genuine from the get-go.
That's great. Remind me again, how long did Luca stay with you?
Luca was with me for 3.5 weeks, almost
3.5 weeks, which is a long time for a 14-year-old.
Yeah. But they keep them so busy after school, and then I had them so busy. One of the things I do with the boys is I take them to a Mets game because they have a little bit of an idea about baseball. They know cricket, so they kind of I get an understanding of the game. But all 4 of them fell in love with baseball, and Luca fell in love with actually playing baseball. Which was hard for me because I had to go out every night and play catch with him, and I'm not in the kind of shape anymore to do that. But I did, and he wanted a baseball glove and a baseball, so he has all that. And one of the big things he was looking forward for us to go to Corsica was to play catch with him. So
so you're really like a surrogate father.
I think more like a grandfather, or because the benefit you have is that you're not the disciplinarian.
That's right.
You're not the father. You're an older friend, so I think you get a little more respect, and they look up to you. They listen to you more.
That's a good point.
Yeah, we have a tendency as young boys, and I remember myself, we don't listen to our parents, but we find a mentor or somebody else.
True.
Could be the same age, the same background, and then they just hold a little more sway with us. And I see it seems to be the same thing with these boys. So if I may, just a little background. Corsica is a Mediterranean island. It's southeast of France and west of Italy. It's north of Sardinia. It's the 4th largest island in the Mediterranean after Sicily, Sardinia, and Cyprus.
Yeah, it's a big one.
It's 3,300 square miles. And it's got a stunning coastline. It's basically coastline, mountains, and valleys. And some of the mountains are as high as 9,000 feet. And it was at one time under Genoese rule and was ceded to France in 1769 to repay a debt to Louis XV. So it's part of France now for over 200 years. And one of its major claims to fame is that it is the birthplace of Napoleon. And he was born there in 1769.
Yep.
So French is the official language. Many still speak Corsican. And Corsican, to me, I can speak some Italian, is a very familiar sounding language, but it sounds more like a very strong Italian dialect.
Exactly. It's an Italian dialect is what it is, really. I think even as far as the linguists are concerned, that's how they classify it.
One of my first experiences with it was on the ferry to buy a sandwich at the snack bar, and the man just did not understand English. I tried my rudimentary French. He did not understand. And then when I spoke Italian to him, the light bulb went on and he understood. So I figured, all right, I'm in for something different.
Yeah.
The weather there was hot. It was in the low 80s. And it was interesting because at that time, northern France was having a very, very strong heat wave in the 90s, which was unusual for northern France. So we're in Corsica in the 80s, which I thought was hot because it's humid there. And there was no rain. And the house we stayed in, it was they call it a flat, an apartment. Mm-hmm. And Bastia is very hilly. It reminded me of San Francisco and the vegetation and just the steepness of the hills. So the house was up on the side of one of the hills, the apartment building, and the windows facing out to the sea. Over the rooftops in the distance, you could see the Mediterranean.
Nice.
The windows, everything was open. So it was very breezy. They opened these just big windows. It was a 3-bedroom apartment. And what was nice was they gave us their master bedroom. So Carl and Dion bunked with Luca. Luca had one of those beds that's almost like a bunk bed, but doesn't have a bottom. So there's more room in the room.
Yes.
So they stuck a mattress under there and they bunked with him. Lillian had her room, and my partner and I had their bedroom because I every time Carl needed to go in what was his bedroom to get something, he would ask permission, and I said, "Carl, this is your house." Yeah. And I said, you gave us your bedroom, you gave us your house, you gave us your time. And again, he says, I'll never forget what you did for my son. And, I just showed his son a good time, basically.
Yeah, but you see, the thing is, that's typical French hospitality.
I found out, 3 times over now that that's exactly what it is. It's superb hospitality.
Yeah.
So again, I had absolutely no idea what to expect.
Right.
So that afternoon when they picked us up at the ferry, we got into his Renault, and right off the bat, instead of taking us straight home, he took us to give us a little overview of the northern part of the island. And Carl is probably in his early to mid 40s. Mm-hmm. And he said that when he graduated from high school in Corsica, there was at that time the French boys, I don't know if the girls did, they had to do a year of government service. And
it was either service or military.
Yeah, he did his with the military, and he was stationed on Corsica. Mm-hmm. And part of his job was to maintain some of the antennas that are on these very high peaks. So he knows the island like the back of his hand. And it's interesting about Carl is originally from St. Bart's, and he considers himself to be Caribbean. His mother and father live in St. Barth. Dion is from Paris. They live on Corsica, and the main reason why they're not living in St. Bart's, they do spend their summers there, is because of the university system. The university schools in France. Yeah. So I actually, as a side note, he's in St. Barth right now, assisting his folks. They own some villas there, and doing repair work and recovering from the hurricane.
Yeah.
So,
wow. Well, the great thing about this is that, to me, is that you stayed with French people. It's not like you were hosted by, a corporation or very wealthy French people. These sound like regular French people.
Exactly. And again, I didn't know what to expect.
Yeah.
I thought we would just be lounging around, taking it easy. Well, it turns out that Carl took the week off, and he had every day he had something planned for us. Oh, cool. And it was a whirlwind because it's a pretty big island. So after the first day, he took us on the overview of the northern part of the island. The next day was a Saturday, and in the morning, he piled us in the car, and we drove up to Saint Florent, which is not far from Bastia. And Bastia is full of a lot of very, very small towns, or I think they call them communes.
Yeah.
And this one had about 2,000 people. And basically you see pleasure boats, yachts, a small harbor, bars, restaurants, and maybe some historical monument like a citadel or a Genoese tower. And they're extraordinarily picturesque. Mm-hmm. And I started to get the picture of Corsica as everywhere you went, it was just stunning beauty. It just wasn't ordinary or just a really nice, picturesque place. It was stunningly beautiful. And the contrast between the mountains, the valleys, the beaches, and the deep blue water of the Mediterranean, it was just, I don't like to take a lot of pictures on a trip. I was taking a lot of pictures. So that afternoon, then he took us, we drove over to part of what they call the Cap Corse, which is the finger that sticks up at the northern part of Corsica. It's very geographically evident when you look at a map. And again, it's another fishing village, and it was a rock-like peninsula. This one had a Genoese tower and a ruins. Again, a lot of photo opportunities.
Yeah.
So it was, again, just another beautiful, beautiful place. So in the afternoon, we drove back to Bastia. Carl went home and had to attend to a few things, so he left us in the hands of Luca. And he instructed Luca to get us on this little, what they call a petit train touristique. Mm-hmm. And it's a small train that takes you through, shows you the entire village or city of Bastia.
Bastia, yeah.
Bastia is the second largest city on Corsica. It has about 43,000 people. Like I said, it reminds me of San Francisco. And in that it's so hilly. So going down the hills from the flat to walk down is fine. To walk back up is really exercise.
It's a workout, yeah.
Yeah. In fact, when we finally got around to playing catch with Luca, we had to walk at almost a mile to find a park that had a flat surface so we could throw a baseball to each other.
Oh, wow.
It's just silly. And it's stuck between the sea and the mountain. It has two ports. There's an old port and a new port, and you can see these very, very clearly from a higher elevation. So the petit train takes you to St. Nicholas Square, which is the big square in the town, and there is a statue of Napoleon in the square.
Of course.
And most Corsican towns, I come to find, has a citadel. Then we went to the Cathedral San Maria di Bastia, the Saint Jean Baptiste Church, and the Bastia Cathedral. So we got to see all that. So it gave us a nice overview.
So that's the nice touristy bits
of the town. Yeah, it was really nice.
Mm-hmm.
So then we go back to the house, and again, I have no idea what's in store. And now it's early evening, and we pile back into the Renault, and now we go off driving up into the mountain. And Carl is a pilot, and he knows Corsica really well. I don't travel in a car very well. I get a little bit car sick. I get just woozy, and I told him that. So he made me sit in the front seat, and so we drove up this mountain, and we went into a town not far from Bastia called Murato.
Yeah.
And that's a tiny town up on the mountain. It's 600 people. It's 3,700 feet up. And on the way we were going to a restaurant to eat. So on the way up, he stopped a couple of times to different elevations for us to look out and take pictures. And there was this very beautiful church up there called San Michele Church. And the exterior appearance of the church was almost like a checkerboard, because it's two-tone layering of stone. And it's a checkered appearance. And the legend of the church is that it was built by angels, that the people of the town woke up one morning and there was the church. So then we end up going, this little curvy winding road turns into a dirt road for about 1 kilometer. And we end up at what was at one time a big farm. And there were some farmhouses, farm buildings. And that turned out to be a restaurant called La Femme de Campo de Monte.
Okay.
And I think it's the farm at the top of the mountain or the camp of the mountain.
Yep.
And it was the views from up there were stunning. There was a beautiful valley, mountain views. All the buildings were stone buildings.
So they picked a really nice restaurant with a beautiful view.
This place was just out of this world. You sit there and you think to yourself, "Am I dreaming this, or is this? Am I really seeing this?" And they start you. They have a little pond there, and they start you off with an aperitif, and you're outside. And it was just the family and myself and my partner at this point. There were no other patrons, and so we were able to talk, take pictures. The kids were running around. It was kind of a nice thing. Mm-hmm. Then they take you into a very attractive, very well-appointed dining room. And it seems like they have a few dining rooms with probably about 6 tables each. And again, extraordinarily well-appointed, picturesque. It just like out of picture books that you see and you think you would never, ever in your entire life be there or visualize. Mm-hmm. And so Carl, it seemed like he had an acquaintance with the owner, because it's all family owned, and they do a lot of the food is local. It either comes from the farm or it comes from very, very locally sourced.
Yep.
So Carl wanted the owner to explain the menu to me, and he spoke with her in French, so I didn't pick up on what he said. I misunderstood. I sat there and I tried to listen, and I thought that he didn't know what the menu was going to be, and he told her that I understood Italian, that she was going to explain the menu to me in Italian, and then I in turn would tell them what was on the menu. Because every weekend, I think it's only open on weekends, and it's interesting, if they get enough reservations, they open. If they don't get enough reservations, they don't open.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So I started listening to the woman, and she starts reading off this whole list, and I'm now translating the minestrone into a vegetable soup and the vitello into veal. Yeah. And she finally realizes, and she says, no, this is not a menu. This is everything you're getting tonight. It was like it was a menu from a restaurant. It was a lot of food, and I started to realize we're going to be here for a while, and we're going to eat a lot of food. So it's actually a 5-course set menu dinner, including the wine, grappa, and coffee. So everything is included for one price.
Wow!
And it was copious. I mean, the servings were endless. They started with a very hearty vegetable or like a minestrone like soup. Mm-hmm. That I had to stop at 2 bowls because I knew if I kept eating the soup that there would be no room for anything else. And I desperately really wanted more of the soup, but we all had to stop.
Yeah, you have to pace yourself.
Yeah, and then they follow that with Corsican charcuterie, and that seems to be very, very popular on the island.
Yeah.
And that was copious and very good. And then they serve these things called corgetti beignet, which are like almost like for people who know what zeppoli are, the Italian pastry. It's almost like a donut.
Yeah. Okay.
It doesn't have a hole in it, but it's almost like a cream or jelly donut without the cream or jelly in it. And so those were served with the charcuterie. That was followed by a big serving of, well, it's all family style, so you help yourself, but they put a big platter on the table.
In the middle, yeah.
Sauteed veal. So we enjoyed that, and I'm thinking, okay, what can be coming next? Well, next was a big platter of meat lasagna, and so we dug into that. So
I hope you came hungry.
Yeah, you get hungry, but you really try to pace yourself, yeah, and realize that the more you leave room for, the more you can enjoy of what was coming up.
And it's funny because I'm looking at your photos as you're talking, and these people are all skinny, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think this is an every day, every week occurrence. Right. Because all the rest of the meals we ate at home or lunches we ate while we were traveling in just small restaurant pizzas and things like that.
Yeah.
And but you don't really see a lot of overweight people in France. At least I never have. Mm-hmm. So then they followed with the cheese course, sheep and goat cheese made from sheep and goat milk. And it was interesting because the night before, Carl was teasing us about the Corsican cheese, that it's a very, very potent cheese. It's a sheep's cheese, but it's nothing like Pecorino. It's a lot stronger and more potent. And I enjoy strong cheeses. My grandmother, coming from an Italian background, raised me on Gorgonzola, and she always used to have a saying that the wormier the cheese is, the better it is.
Yeah, that's literally.
It never frightened me to see the blue veining of Gorgonzola, and I've eaten it since I was a kid. But there are people who they just can't handle that thought. So Carl was trying to tease me about the cheese, and I told him, I said, Carl, whatever you eat, I will eat. And I told him about my grandmother's saying, but my partner Donnie was not having any of it, and he said that sometimes the cheese is so fresh that the worms are still moving. I got a little nervous, but I figured, okay, if he'll eat it, I'll eat it. Well, they don't serve that cheese at this restaurant, but the cheese basket, and I think I sent you a picture of that, was huge. And some confiture in with it, and there was a pasty cheese in there that Carl told me was the strongest. And that was the one I liked the best. You take a taste of it, and as soon as it hits the back of your throat, it really, really hits you. And it was delicious.
A pasty cheese? You mean a spread cheese?
Yeah, you could see it. You spread it on
okay.
toast.
I don't think I haven't had that one.
Yeah, it's a point that I was enjoying it so much. I was just putting it on the plate and eating it with a fork. So then they followed that with, I guess, dessert was souffled beignets, which were dumpling-like donuts again, with clementine preserves, because clementines grow on the island. And so they had the natural clementine preserves. They serve lots of grappa. Again, you need a reservation for the restaurant. It doesn't open if there are not enough people.
Right.
And I looked at all this. I'm thinking, in the middle of all this was an amazing, amazing sunset that we all had to get up, go outside, and take pictures of. So it was as if I died and gone to heaven. And I told Carl, I said, this is the best meal experience of my lifetime.
Wow.
I'm 64 years old. I've lived in Texas. I've spent a lot of time in New Orleans. I'm right on top of New York City. I've eaten in some really, really great restaurants, but nothing matches the experience of this restaurant.
That's amazing.
So I realized, he's raising a family. He and his wife work, and I didn't want him to foot the bill for this meal. I to this day, I still don't know what it is. I'm sure if people want to go online, they could find out. But I sidled up to him and I said, Carl, look, how about we split the bill?
Uh-huh.
And he looked at me and he said, then it wouldn't be my gift to you.
Ah, well,
and
yeah.
So what do you say to that? So,
yeah. Yeah.
So it was this spectacular experience. And
wonderful.
Now it's pitch black, dark night, and we made our way down But it was interesting because I had complete faith and trust in his driving ability because I knew he knew the island and the fact that he was a pilot. So I was fine, and
sure.
We got home safe.
Yeah, you should. Yeah, I mean, we're used to those roads. We drive them all the time. It's not scary to us.
Yeah. So the next day was Sunday. We slept in a little bit. And then we went to the market in Bastia. Mm-hmm. And, it's interesting because Dayan wasn't with us the first few days. She actually works in Ajaccio, which is the capital of Corsica, and it's a little distance away from Bastia. So she came back up on Tuesday, but she left Carl with some prepared foods and a list of things to cook and for him to take care of us. For the meals, and come to find that Carl wasn't very comfortable in cooking and doing, kitchen duties. Where my partner and I are pretty good at it, but we, again, we didn't know.
Wasn't your house, yeah.
So we're in the market in Bastia, and I guess a lot of the French markets are famous for the rotisserie chickens.
Yes.
So you see this big wall of rotisserie chickens with the juices flowing down into the potatoes.
Mm-hmm.
And my partner and I looked at Donnie and I looked at it. We said, "Wow, this has got to be an amazing." Because by this time it was about 12 hours after we just had the big feast of our lifetime, so we started to get hungry again.
Of course.
So we talked Carl into letting us get some rotisserie chicken and potatoes to take home.
Cool.
And we also some of the local cheese. They call it brochu. It's BROCCIU, which is that pecorino. The sheep's milk cheese. So we got some of that. So we went home, we ate, and then we piled in the car. We went to a local beach. And another thing I really loved about Corsica is I'm an ice cream fiend, and there are so many gelato places. Everywhere there's a gelato stand. And I didn't have any gelato that I didn't like. So I made sure that we got some everywhere. So that took care of our day on Sunday.
Wow.
So on Sunday, Carl kept telling us that the next day he was going to take us to the southernmost part of the island, a town called Bonifacio.
Yes.
And he said that was a very, very beautiful town. And I'm thinking, how much more beautiful can things get than this? And then when he kept telling us that it was about a 3-hour drive to down a 3.5 hour drive. I think it's 150 miles.
Yeah, because it's rocky and stuff.
Yeah, well, even though a lot of the road was the highway road, but it was the speed limits are not very, very. I just can't drive fast, and because of the way I am in cars, I told Donnie, I said on Sunday, I said, we have to let Carl know that there's no way I can make that trip 3 hours each way. It's 6 hours in the car. I'm not, and it's as if Carl read my mind because on Sunday night. And he was all excited. He said, tomorrow we're going to Bonifacio. He says, and you have to go. And I'm so grateful and thankful for him that he forced me to go. He forced me to do a lot of – he got me out of my comfort zone, as you'll find out a couple of times. But we piled into that Renault the next day, and we drove down to Bonifacio. And that is the most beautiful place on the most beautiful island I've ever been. It is just gorgeous. It's the tip of the island. About 3 hours from Bastia, 3,000 population, and it's you just see the limestone outcroppings of the white and gray and the different colored limestone against the deep blue of the Mediterranean Ocean, and it's the city is in two sections. Is the Vieille Ville, the old town?
La Vieille Ville, yes.
Yeah, and the Haute Ville, the high town. We got down there probably about 11 o'clock in the morning, and it was packed. This was in June, so it wasn't even the season. So Carl drove the car up to the high town, and all the parking lots. There's a lot of parking lots for the tourists because you walk through the town, you don't drive through the town, and he couldn't find a spot, and he found something that was an illegal parking space. And he put the car there, and he went to a local person that was running a small business near there, and he asked him if the car would be, and the guy told him that he would have no problem with the car there, that it was a good choice. So he didn't have to pay for parking, and he had parking. Otherwise, I don't know how much longer it would have taken. But again, it's a nice thing to be with somebody who kind of knows the ins and outs or could figure it out.
Well, and they know, they've seen if the cops come around or not,
Right.
It's a good question to ask. Because in France, we all park illegally all the time. It's terrible. I'm totally against it, but I still do it.
I mean, it wasn't anything that was blocking anything for safety purposes. It was just a spot that wasn't a designated parking area.
Right.
So you get to see the harbor from the high part of the town, and again a citadel, a 9th century citadel in the high town, and from there you can see the northern coast of Sardinia. And again, there was a ship in the sea, and the ship was white. I got a great picture of a seagull. It's one of my favorite pictures that I've ever taken, close up from there. And it's that Bonifacio is full of grottos. The citadel is there. Beautiful cemetery. I saw a cemetery in Nice, and the cemeteries that I've seen in France are magnificent as far as the art and the monuments.
Yeah, we usually have very nice cemeteries.
Yeah, we walked through there, and we saw the Governor de la Cour's 20th century fortification, and it's a long, steep stairway. It's 168 steps, leading down the vieille ville from the high town. Mm-hmm. And I saw a poster for a concert that was going to happen later that night called Polyphonies Course.
Yeah, Polyphonie Corse, yes.
And I asked Carl about that, and he said that it was a native music native to Corsica, and it's basically like an a cappella kind of singing of hymns and almost like church-like music. Mm-hmm. And what we did there was all the restaurants looked terrific. They looked like postcards, and we found one that had some casual food salads and pizzas, and the food was very good and very enjoyable.
Excellent.
And I took a picture of a menu board that had typical or traditional Corsican fare on the board, and aubergine à la Bonificienne, which is eggplant Bonifacio style.
I don't know that one.
It's an eggplant dish. Again, I didn't eat it. I just saw it on the menu board as we were passing a restaurant. I took a picture because it was a picturesque handwritten board. Mm-hmm. And then they have ravioli au brochu, which is the ravioli with that sheep's milk cheese.
Right.
And then an assortment of charcuterie. And what's a very popular meat on the island, which I did not get to sample, is sanglier, which is boar, wild boar, which are pretty common on the island.
Oh, they're common all over France, but it's not very good. I'm sorry, I don't like that.
It's interesting. I have a little pug dog. They call him Carline in France, and have those little signs with your dog, and it has a little saying. So I bought one. I have it on my mailbox here, and in French it says the pug is the killer of the wild boar, and they have the sanglier.
I don't know if that's true. Maybe it is. I don't know.
Then again, they have the sauté de veau course, or the sauté of veal Corsican.
Yeah.
And of course, at this time, we were there right around the turn of the season, and from spring into summer. And it seems like every town in France on the first day of summer has what they call the Fête de la Musique.
Yes, on June 21st, all over the country, all over Europe, actually.
The music festival on the first day of summer.
Yep.
So we saw the posters there for that.
Cool.
And actually, it was in Bastia on the first day of summer, and we were at the flat, sitting on the terrace, and we could hear the music coming from the square in Bastia. So that was that day. We on the way back from Bonifacio, Carl wanted to show us one of he claims the nicer beaches in Corsica, which I thought all the beaches were nice. The nicer ones are more to the south of the island on I guess it would be the eastern coast.
Okay.
And we went to stopped at a beach called Santa Giulia. Mm-hmm. And a beautiful beach, beautiful water. And we stopped, we had a few drinks. And then we returned back, took the trip back to Bastia.
Right, but you didn't think it was that much nicer than the others?
It seemed a little bit, just a little bit bigger and more populated. In fact, the road from the main road to the beach was crowded, and that's where all the cars parked.
I see.
And as we were coming back, there were men that were starting to push a car off the middle of the road because there was just one lane to get through between the two sides of parked cars, and the car had stopped and they couldn't get it started, so they were pushing it off to the side. Mm-hmm. And Carl stopped, jumped out of the car, ran over to the guys and talked to them, and came back. He had jumper cables in his car, and the next thing you know, they get the two cars together and they got the car started. And I said,
nice.
What a wonderful guy! This is trouble. You want to see him come by. So the next day, Dion was with us, and we all piled in the car, and we went to on the western side of the northern part of Corsica, and we didn't go over to Ile Rousse, which is a popular place to go. It's a little island. It's kind of connected by like a little isthmus to the mainland, and it's like a reddish stone, so that's why it has the name Ile Rousse.
Rousse, yes, which means redhead.
And you could see it from the road and the coastline, and the reddish island contrasting with the blue sea was nice to see.
Yeah.
So then next thing I know, we're climbing a mountain again, and now the roads are getting narrower and winding. And I looked out the side of the window, and you look out and you don't see anything next to the road except that it just goes straight down, like a straight drop.
Wow.
Again, I told myself, I said, he knows what he's doing. He's a good driver. He's a pilot. just deal with it. But later, Donnie told me that he was in the back seat, that he was nervous, but that was fine. And we went up to a town, and again, it's like I keep saying, this one's my favorite, but the one I think of last is my favorite. And this town was called Sant'Antonino.
Sant'Antonino, huh?
Sant'Antonino, and it's a mountain town with a very tiny population. And Carl explained to me that a lot of the mountain towns, people just live there on the weekends. Like they have a weekend residence there, and they live in the bigger, live and work in the bigger towns in Corsica. So from those winding roads, again, you got fantastic views of the sea. And it just this whole trip, you're looking out the window of the car, you're walking around, looking at overlooks, and just seeing, could this world be this beautiful? And it was just, again, stunning beauty.
As you're talking to me, I'm looking up photos of these places. Oh, wow.
Yeah,
you're not kidding. It's gorgeous.
I majored in English in college. I'm a writer, and I just can't come up with more words and just stunningly beautiful. And the village is very steep and narrow lanes and pathways. So again, you park the car at the base. This one wasn't crowded, and of course we were there on a weekday. Mm-hmm. And there's a beautiful old church. The Church of the Annunciation is there. So we walked through the town. We had lunch, and it was just a pretty, really, really nice experience. Mm-hmm. And so we spent maybe 2 or 3 hours there. Then we get in the car, and Carl says, "Now I have a special treat for you." Again, you remember now when I said in the beginning that as we got off the boat or planned this trip, I had no idea what was going to go on in Corsica. And basically what Carl was doing with me and Donnie is what I did with Luca, because Luca didn't have a list. He didn't really know what he wanted to do or see in New York. So I just took him and showed him. Yeah,
sure.
Everything.
When you don't, I mean, that's the great thing about having you on the show is that you had a local take you to the cool places, and now you're telling us, and now we'll be going.
Yeah, and the nice thing is that I had a built-in chauffeur who knew everything, knew every place, and was really, really loved. Like I love to show off New York and the New York area. He loved to show off this beautiful island.
Of course, even though he wasn't born there, maybe. Well, you said he was from St. Bart's.
St. Bart, yeah. But he's been on Corsica as well since he's a teenager. So
right.
So now we go to a town called Calenzana, which we didn't spend any time in the town, but there was a vineyard there because now Corsican wines are becoming a little bit prominent. And
especially their rosés are really nice.
He took us to a vineyard, and it's called Domaine Orsini, and it almost looked like it was like an Italian vineyard. And we went in for a wine tasting, and I could take or leave wine. Wine's not the greatest thing in my life, but I enjoyed the tasting and the comparisons of the different wines that they gave us. But what was really, really interesting to me about this vineyard was they do a lot of flavors, fruit flavors, and natural fruit flavors. So they make confiture, like the preserves or the jellies from the fruits of the island, fruits and nuts, walnuts, almonds, myrtle, clementine, figs, that are unbelievable. And the pâtés, the fruit pastes, the candies.
Les pâtes de fruits. That's good stuff.
The only thing I can compare them to, there's an American candy called Chuckles that is a jellied candy, but it's all artificial. And I used to eat them like nothing when I was a kid. But these are such concentrated, pure fruit. That was, and you can't eat a lot of them because they are very, very potent. They're very, very, very good.
Yeah, very sweet.
Very sweet, and they also had the nougat that they make there.
Ooh, that's my weakness.
So not only did the vineyard have great wine, but they also specialized in the fruit flavors. So that was an interesting side of that. So again, and we would get back to the house maybe 7 or 8 o'clock every night. And what was interesting to us too was at this time of the year in France, it doesn't get dark until about 10 o'clock at night.
Right. And
we were used to it getting dark in the New York area probably by 8:30, the latest. And
even in June, July?
Yeah. Usually 8:30 it starts to get dark. Where in France it was 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
So we would eat dinner late. So we would spend time on the terrace, playing games with the kids, and drinking. Carl loved to make mojitos and drinks from the Caribbean. So we had a nice time with that.
Oh, all French people like those.
Yeah. So the more I played Chinese checkers with the 8-year-old, the more she beat me because I couldn't concentrate. And then we would have a dinner of just pork or chicken and a lot of couscous, things like that at home. And one night when Luca was here, he fell in love. I make a meat sauce, tomato sauce for pasta with beef, veal, and pork in it. And Luca absolutely was crazy for it. And at 14 years old, the boy had a huge appetite. and being Italian, you just love it when people like to eat what you feed them. And he loved it so much that when we were there in at his home, he asked me if I could make that while I was there. And I said to him, Luca, I said, your mother's kitchen, it's different pots and pans, it's a different kitchen, and everything here is metric.
True.
So when you go to buy everything, and I just don't have a head for the metric system and conversion. So he had this look on his face like he was really looking forward to it. I said, okay, I'll try. So Jan and I went to the store, and I found I used canned tomatoes, whole tomatoes, and canned puree. So I figured I would do everything in proportions, even, just kind of have an idea of what the size looked like. I had to find real Romano cheese. I was able to find that. Onions, garlic, no problem. Then to get the meat, the problem with the meat is you can, as you know, you can buy meat, haché, chopped meat.
Yeah. Ground beef, ground pork.
Beef. Yeah, but it didn't seem like it was easy to find. And Downs said that, well, we'll go to the butcher. We went to the supermarket. I think it's called Spar.
Yeah, Spar, yes.
And they have a butcher in the supermarket. And so she explained to him that she needed some pork and beef and veal. And so he basically said, point out what you want. And then they grind it for you.
Ground it up, yeah. Yeah, because usually we don't buy ground veal. You can find ground pork, but it's kind of hard to find it without any spices in it. Just the plain ground pork is hard to find. You will find like sausage, but that has a lot of flavors added to it.
Yeah, so I just wanted the plain. Yeah. And I got home and I made it, and it came out really good, except the flavor was a little bit different.
Yeah.
And I finally figured it out was because the meat had basically zero fat in it. And I use an 85%, 15% mix, 15% fat when I make it here. Mm-hmm. And the fat gives it flavor and it gives it moisture. And they loved it. And to me,
because they're not used to the regular.
Yeah, it was probably to me about maybe 70% of what how it usually comes out. Yeah. So Luca had 2 big bowls full. I found the brand of pasta that I use here. They had that there because they all come from Italy. And so Luca had 2 big bowls. His sister had a bowl, and she started on her second bowl. She couldn't finish it, so he grabbed that from her and finished that. And I made enough sauce that they had it. They had another meal again the following week. They texted us and told us when I was in Picardy that they were enjoying
the leftovers.
So the next night, Carl said to me, he said, do you think that you could make us American hamburgers. And I said, hamburgers is not my forte. I said, but Donnie can make hamburgers. So now it was his turn. And when we all went to the supermarket, we literally had to beg the butcher to put fat into the ground beef.
Yeah, yeah.
85-15. And he was so reluctant. It was as if he was ruining the meat. And
you know what I found? If I want really fatty ground beef, I need to buy the cheapest frozen ground beef. And that's super fatty. But if you go to a butcher shop, they will give you fairly lean ground beef.
Yeah, it was lean. So the hamburgers, again, they came out well, but because, again, it wasn't as much fat in it. They weren't as juicy as normal. But, again, they loved it. So that's all.
That's great. That's great.
So the next day, because Carl is a pilot and Luca is interested and has taken some flying lessons. In fact, when he was here, I had him in a simulator at our local airport. We went to the Poretta Airport to the Aero Club de Bastia, St. Exupéry, where Carl is a member. And he told me that he had planned to take us up on a plane and give us a view of Corsica from the air. But because I'm claustrophobic and I had this problem with the car, there was no way, shape, or form I was going to get in a 4-seater airplane. I could barely look at one. And he was disappointed a few days early when I told him that. But he had to show us the planes, and we sat in the plane, but that's as far as it got. We didn't start it up or anything. Yeah. But we had a nice overview of the airport and the small planes coming in and out, and we learned that we saw the plane that Luca was taking lessons in, and that he had just a couple of weeks earlier had learned to land. So that was interesting sidelight. Then we stopped off at a hypermart, and I know when the kids come here, the organization takes them. They like to go shopping, the different stores in the U.S. And we have in the U.S. We were a consumer-oriented culture, and the stores are just laden with all kinds of consumer goods. And I thought, well, maybe in France that's not so much the case until I saw this hypermart.
It depends where you go.
Amazing. It was amazing. I mean, it was a full-scale supermarket right in the middle of it, and it was surrounded by a department store. And
yes.
You very easily could get lost in there, and it looked to me like anything you could possibly ever need was in one of these hypermarkets. And then we went back and spent the rest of the day playing catch.
Yeah, wow.
And then Thursday was the next day was the last day we were in Corsica. Mm-hmm. And Carl and Dion had planned a picnic for us in a river gorge because the weather was hot. And he said the coolest place on the island is by the river in these river gorges. And they don't have air conditioning in the house, nor do they have fans. But the house is open and it's cool, but the fact that it's humid. I lived in Houston. I spent a lot of time in New Orleans. The weather reminded me of that. As soon as you take a shower and put your clothes on, you begin to sweat.
Yeah.
I understand that, so I was fine with it. So now we're off to a town called Corte.
Yes.
It's basically the geographical middle or the heart of the island, and they planned a picnic on the Gorge de la Restonica, which is just a little ways from Corte. So, again, we're up this little narrow road. He parks the car on the side, and we take out these picnic baskets that they had packed and beverages and towels because they go to the river and they swim in the river.
Ah.
And now it's a steep decline from the road straight down. And I looked at my partner, and he had open heart surgery 3 years ago. He's in his 50s, and he's very, very healthy. But I'm thinking that if we get down there and he falls, he's on a blood thinner, there's no way, shape, or form are they going to get any medical help down there. So I started getting nervous. And then very selfishly, I thought, and if I fall on the side of my body where I have my cell phone, my cell phone's going to be... So I'm looking down, I look at Carl, and he says, "Oh, you can do it." So again, he had to get me out of my comfort zone. So we got down okay, because there's a little bit of a trail,
but
it's a pretty steep incline.
It looks beautiful. I'm looking at photos again. Oh my, it is so beautiful.
White rocks and a kind of a rushing river, clear water. Yeah. And in fact, I asked Carl if you could drink the water. He said not this far downstream, I guess because of animals and so on.
Exactly,
but
yeah.
The water was just sparkling clear. And so now he had a spot in mind where they go to picnic on a big flat rock, and it was off in the distance. And I'm thinking, I said, Carl, I'm 64 years old. I said, I don't think I can do this. And he says, yes, you can. He said, take your shoes off. I had shoes and socks on, shorts. He said, take your shoes. I took my shoes off. And Donnie is very athletic. He's much more agile than I am. He wasn't having a problem. And then Carl says to me, just step on the white rocks, because those are the dry ones. The other ones are very slippery. Well, the white rocks were, a good distance away from each other. So I had to do a stretch.
Wow.
We walked a little bit of a distance, got to near a waterfall. And I called up to him and I said, Carl, this is as far as I'm going to go. I just cannot go any further than this. So we found a spot near the waterfall, which was very beautiful. We took out the food.
Yeah, sounds lovely.
Carl and Dion took a little swim in the water. Another young couple came down next to us. They were swimming. Luca was jumping around the rocks like it was nothing. I'm sitting there eating food and thinking about, how am I going to get out of here? Because now that steep decline,
you got to go back up.
You have to go back up.
Yep.
So we stayed down about an hour or so. Again, the beauty, and again, it's such a different kind of beauty, because now we're in a forest, in a river gorge, with this beautiful sparkling water and this white rock sitting under a waterfall. Just how much better could it possibly be?
Mm-hmm.
So actually, the ascent going back up was not so bad. We made it fine.
Mm-hmm.
And we went into Corte, which is a university town, has about 7,000 people. And this was another beautiful town. And the thing about this town that was so unique was that the old part of the town is very old, and the new part of the town is very modern. So you had a contrast of the old and the new in one place.
Mm.
And it's the University of Corsica, Pasquale Paoli, who's the patriot of Corsica, 4,400 student school. And again, Corte has a citadel and a fortress. So
wow,
we spent a couple hours there, very nice photo opportunities. And a beautiful,
wow.
And I would suggest, because Corte is in the middle of Corsica, and people that would visit Corsica probably won't have the facility that I had with the family to get around Corsica. Probably that would be a good base to stay in, because it's.
You think Corte would be a good place to central kind of location?
Right, it's a beautiful town. It's old and new, and it's convenient to both coasts, east and west. And because it's right in the middle of the island, I think geographically it would be easier to get down to Bonifacio and maybe all the way up to San Antonino from there. So
if you like driving, because I think from Corte you probably are 2-3 hours. I don't know. I'd have to look. I mean, obviously,
it seems like it's in the middle, probably an hour and a half from Bonifacio.
Okay.
Which is be another hour and a half up to Bastia. So we never got to Ajaccio. That wasn't on his plan. And that's the capital of Bastia. So I didn't see much of the western part of the island, the southwestern part of the island.
That's interesting, because Ajaccio is the only part I've seen personally.
Yeah. Yeah, so that,
if you ever go on a cruise ship that stops on Corsica, it will probably stop at Ajaccio, and it's a gorgeous port, because you pull up right into the middle of the city, of the old city. So it's one of those magical, you wake up in the morning on a cruise and you don't know where you're going to be, right? But there, you're right in the middle. It's gorgeous.
So it just blends in with the rest of Corsica as one of the, well, not one of, but the most magnificent place I've ever been in my life. My son is in his 16th year in the Air Force, and he's got a 3-year tour in Hawaii. I've never been to Hawaii, and people tell me how beautiful and wonderful. And I tell my son, I said, I'll eventually get out there while you're there.
You must.
But if Hawaii is anything like Corsica, I'd be very surprised because I've seen pictures of Hawaii and it looks nice, but
oh, it looks lovely.
I tell you, Corsica was just a stunningly beautiful place. I was with some beautiful people. I didn't get to do much or anything hardly on my own, which I missed a little bit. Mm-hmm. But I was so grateful for the fact that, here was a family that literally gave up a week in their lives to show us this island the way they showed us. The hospitality was just, I mean, there and in Picardy, this every time I would ask, can I this or how about this? The answer always was, as you like. Or what you like. Whatever you want to do, that's what we're going to do.
That's wonderful.
And I had never been treated, I said this when I was in Morzine with Tungi's family. I say it again in Corsica. I'll say it again in Picardy, that to get treated that well, that spectacularly in your life, to be spoiled and to be treated as a special person is something that it's unforgettable. You just never forget it. And to have people open their arms and their homes to you like
and
this.
It's the best way to visit a place, honestly. It's like you have family there.
Yeah, because, you see it from the inside out.
Yeah. It's obviously most people who will listen to this podcast won't have that opportunity, but you've given them a lot of insider tips on things that they can do to enjoy it. Obviously, they won't have...
The thing with Corsica is I don't think many people even think about Corsica as a destination.
Well, a lot of French people go.
Yes, I was just gonna say that among the French people, that seems like it's a place to go. In fact, the family in Picardy, the week after we left, their summer vacation was a week in Corsica.
Yeah.
So they were going where I had just come from. So I had a lot to tell them about.
Yeah.
But as far as the only people that I could recognize from outside of France that were in Corsica there were British people.
Right.
But other than that, and I think Americans never, because when I tell people I went to Corsica, the look I get is, where's that?
Right.
What part of France is that in? And then I try to explain to them, and it's that this place exists and it's not on top of mind on many people outside of France is amazing.
And it's drop dead gorgeous. I think I would kind of compare it a little bit to Puerto Rico, where it's I mean, it's America, but it's separate enough that
it is very different. Like, you do have French flavor, you have Italian flavor, and you have Corsican flavor, and it's unique, kind of shifting between those cultures and seeing all of it and how they blend and exist together.
Right. And unfortunately, when Corsica is on the news in France anyway, it's often for just they have a faction of people who want to be independent.
It's similar to Quebec.
Right. So
that every once in a while the separatist movement rears its head up in Quebec, and then it settles down, and then again it comes back up.
Exactly. And it has been that way forever. And it probably will never stop. I mean, that's the kind of thing where, and I think Catalonia is the same. They're going to go through a vote very soon. Well, they want to vote. Spain doesn't want them to vote. Anyway, so it's a whole different discussion. But this happens. And whenever we hear about Corsica, it's not always like, those Corsicans, they are different from us French people. But I don't think it's that different. It's just that it has a strong Italian kind of, and their own kind of Corsican culture.
Right.
Yeah, and it's gorgeous. I mean, everybody I know who's been, I've only spent a day there on a cruise, so it's really not. It was just enough for me to think, oh my goodness, this is beautiful. And of course, since we were on a cruise ship, we were mostly with, I can't remember, I think it was Royal Caribbean or something like that. So there were a lot of American cruisers, and my husband and I often speak English anyway. I mean, we can switch to French whenever, but so we get like, these just more Americans, and so they treated us like American tourists right off of a cruise ship, which is not the same. If I went again, I would speak French or Italian, because we both speak Italian as well, and I think things would be different.
Yeah, I think Corsica is set up very well for tourism because they get a lot of tourists from mainland France.
Right.
And I didn't have a lot of interaction with native Corsicans, but the interaction that I had, like at the market and at the restaurant, was very positive and very welcoming. Of course. But again, I was with natives, so I don't know
you're
how
with French people, and it's like anywhere else, bonjour, be polite,
absolutely,
smile at people. Don't be demanding, I demand service now. That never works in France, so don't do it.
Yeah, that's one thing. I'm glad you brought that up, Anna, because I try to explain that to my American friends about the differences in the culture and the politeness that's required in France and in Quebec. That as soon as you make an attempt, bonjour, and ask people, would you be able to direct me to whatever, that it makes a huge difference. Or even I thought, if you learn anything else, but je ne parle pas français or parlez-vous anglais, after you say the requisite bonjour, you say bonjour when you go into a store, you say au revoir when you leave a store. Yep. It's very simple, but Americans don't do that. They rush up to you and say, "Where's the Statue of Liberty?" And it's over there.
Yeah.
then they get the rudeness returned, and they say, "Oh, all French people are rude." Well, I'll tell you what, I've never been treated as well by an American family as I've been treated by now 3 French families.
Oh, that's great. I'm really glad that that sounds like a fabulous experience, and it's a really good suggestion to do au pair stuff. Well, it's not au pair, sorry. It's student exchange.
Right.
Sounds
it's such a families that have kids. It's even more enriching for their children to have one of their peers from another part of the world with them. They take kids from Germany, Spain, Italy, France, Hong Kong, China, Indonesia. So, and I since the experience with Tanguy was so good, I've just stayed with the French boys, and it's just been the best experience of my life to do this.
That's great.
And I look forward to.
And I have a relative here in Toulouse who has done this with American universities for years. I mean, now they're too old to do this, but she must have had like 10 or 15 American students over the years. As soon as her kids left the house, because she had 4 children, as soon as her kids moved out and went to college and whatever, she just renovated the bedrooms for students from America. And over the years, she's had so many. And she doesn't speak a word of English. So that's really good because they come to her house and they have to speak French,
That's why people say, well, why don't you take an Italian kid? I said, because then I would be tempted to speak Italian, and they're here to really practice their English.
Yeah.
So it works really well. I mean, every once in a while, I have to say something in French or look at Google Translate to get a point across. But the energy that they bring, their experience, their thirst for knowledge about our culture. Like when Tanguy was here, the things that amazed him was the complexity of our healthcare system in the United States versus France's. The fact that when he sat down to watch something on television, an hour program has about 20 minutes of commercials, all the legal ads about sue over this.
Yeah.
He was a very curious kid, and all of a sudden he would look at me, he says, "Why do you have this? Why is this like this?" And then puts me on the spot to try to explain the American system, which a lot of times is not explainable.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, that makes for a very, very interesting experience. And then you have lifetime kids, and hopefully my legacy will be that decades from now they'll look back on the time they were a teenager and they spent time in New York, that it was a great time in their lives.
Oh, I'm sure that's the case. That's going to be the case, because you don't forget stuff that happened to you when you were young. You don't forget the kindness of people. No.
And I keep in touch with them, all 4 of them now, either with Google Hangouts or WhatsApp. At least every other Sunday, I send a message, or they'll send a message to me just to keep up what's going on in school and how they're getting along. So before we wrap, Luca had sent me an essay that he wrote when he returned to Corsica from here in 2016. And it was an essay that he wrote in English for English class about New York. And he writes about how the different things that he did. And I'm just going to read his last line. He said, "I would love to re-practice bike in Central Park and return to my host family because those are the best people that I know."
Wow.
Now, how do you not cry? when you see that.
That's very sweet. That's super nice. And I'm sure he meant it too. I mean, he just, now you're America to him. You're the American to him. And so that's awesome.
He spends his summers in St. Bart. Now there's a situation in St. Bart, but he returned from St. Bart in August back to Corsica, and right away he writes to me. He says, "Next year you have to come to St. Bart." And and his father already tried when we were in Corsica to give me a plan on how to fly to St. Bart from this area.
Yes, and when he gets married,
it does entail a little bit of a tiny plane ride from St. Martin to St. Bart. So
and when he gets married, guess who's going to be going to a wedding?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, any life event.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, William. It's been fun listening to you, and I think you've shared some really outstanding places that people can visit in Corsica. I hope to go myself because I've only been for the one day, and I loved it, and I just need to go back. And Elise has lived on Corsica, as a matter of fact, for a few years.
There's so much history there, so it's right up her alley.
Yeah. So anyway, thank you very much, and so we'll talk to you on the next episode to discuss Picardie.
Great.
All right. Thank you, William.
Thank you.
Au revoir.
Au revoir.
Thank you for signing up to support Join Us in France on Patreon this week. Anonymous from the USA. Thank you also for your kind note. Your support is much appreciated, even if you'd like to remain the one who shall not be named. Many thanks to all the patrons who support the show month after month. I want you to know how much I appreciate your continued support. To join the list of patrons, go to patreon.com and search for Join Us in France. Patreon is Patreon, and there's a link in the show notes for that. For my personal update this week, I want to say thank you to all of you who responded yes to my request for beta readers. I had more volunteers than necessary, so I've started a list for the next book, and I'll ping you back when I get to book number 2. I have to say how happy I am to see the positive response from all of you listeners and email subscribers. It's a good feeling to know that I'm not just talking to myself. Don't laugh, because right now I'm talking to myself. I'm in the office. Nobody's there because I have to record this when it's quiet, and it's just me talking to a microphone. So sometimes I think, well, am I really just talking to myself? I am really enjoying spending time writing. I have a lot to learn, obviously, but it's going smoothly, and I'm making great progress, and I'm loving it. So that part is awesome. And I am also preparing for our big Thanksgiving celebration this year. Typically, I've done 2 Thanksgiving meals. One on Thursday, on Thanksgiving Day, where I invite American friends and just immediate family. And then one on Saturday, where I invite my brother, my sister, their kids, and all of that. So there's one Thanksgiving for the Americans and another one for the French family. My French family, they're really cute. They don't really get the whole Thanksgiving thing, but we like to get together a lot. So, even if I told them, come in the middle of November and I'll serve you plain noodles, they would come anyway. So, but I do a lot more than plain noodles. So this year I've decided to just do one big Thanksgiving celebration on the Thursday. And I will mix the Americans with the French, and we'll see how it goes. We haven't tried that before. My house isn't real big, and I only have 2 big tables, so I can only fit 17 guests. And even then, it's going to be packed in really tight. Elise is going to be there, of course. But, there's always more people that I want to invite than there is room. But we'll make do. We live in a typical French house, which is smaller than your average American house. And normally I don't mind living in a fairly small house, but when big holidays come around, I'd like to push the walls out a little bit. Normally it's just 3, sometimes 4 of us, so it's really not a big deal typically. Okay, now listen up, because I want to let you know about the 24-hour promo that will take place on Black Friday for the May Addicted to France tour. The promo is for new orders and will only run for 24 hours. But if you want to get a tour to France for Christmas, that'll be the day to get it because it'll be a sweet discount. So I'll mention it again in next week's episode, and I will send out an email reminder to folks who subscribe to the email list, to the extras. Don't miss it. It'll just run for 24 hours on Black Friday. Also this week, I want to read a new iTunes review from Knoxlox3 from the United States, who says, "The best there is. I am a Francophile, a rather big one. I dream about Paris and my wife and I visit annually. There is surprisingly so very little quality content out there, and YouTube posts are crummy, poor quality vlogs." I'm just reading what he's saying. "Join Us in France is amazingly educational and entertaining. With a daily 2-hour commute, I plan to listen to all 160 plus episodes." Oh yeah, it's like 175 by now. Available right now. And that's a really long commute. Oof. Also, drop them a donation. You wouldn't think twice about spending $20 on an audiobook. Let's support these ladies as well. Well, thank you very much, Knoxlox3. Much appreciated. I think one of the reasons why we bring more interesting content to the table is because being French and living in France every day, there are a lot of subtleties that I understand, that Elise understands, that folks who only have a superficial understanding of the country do not. The people who come on the show do it because they want to be helpful. They have no skin in the game, they don't care if you go there or not. And very often things happen on their trip and they're not sure why. How could they? They're not local. They wouldn't understand this stuff. And I can explain it because as a French person who lives in France, it makes total sense to me. It's a genuine exchange between a local and a visitor, and that's not something you find anywhere else. And it really brings a lot of depth to the podcast because we each have a different point of view, but yet we can add onto each other's views. The other thing that sets this podcast apart is that I do episodes about what interests me. I was told long ago never to do that. I was supposed to study what people click on, what they share, what pushes their buttons, and then write stuff that will push their buttons some more. Yeah, the trouble is, it's not me, and I'm not interested in pushing your buttons. I'm interested in reading about things that intrigue me and that interest me, and I hope they will intrigue you too. For example, I love Voltaire, so I did an episode about Voltaire. I admire Marie Curie. I really enjoyed visiting the small museum in Paris dedicated to her work at the Sorbonne, so I did an episode about that. Neither of those episodes get a lot of clicks, but it adds depth, and I enjoy doing them, so, And I really think that if you know about Voltaire and if you know about Marie Curie, you understand France better. So it's part of adding depth. Allow me a very short rant here, but, it's bad enough that everything we read on Facebook and Google is exactly what we want to hear. You don't need the podcast to do that too. Remember long ago when we read the newspaper on a Sunday morning? They did their best to report on everything and expose us to a variety of news stories. Some of them we liked, some of them we didn't, some we read, some we didn't, but there it was, all in front of us, right? Now the algorithms decide what we want to read, and they don't even show us anything else. They're not interested in educating us or giving us a broad view on anything. They're interested in keeping us on their platform. So anything you'll click on, they'll show you. So if you only ever click on cats, they will show you cats day in and day out. It's so sad. And you really don't need that in the podcast as well. Now, I'm trying to make the site Join Us in France more visible in Google, but not by pushing people's buttons, but rather by creating a better structure for the episodes. It'll be the difference between an orderly closet and a messy closet. It's still the same clothes, still the odd hat that you hardly ever wear, but in an orderly fashion. I'm not super tidy in real life, But I can totally see the value in making the effort, so I'm making the effort. The best way to connect with me is email me, Annie@joinusinfrance.com, or leave a voicemail, 1-801-806-1015. If there's a great tidbit you want to share with the listeners, call the voicemail and I'll play it on the show, 1-801-806-1015. For the May tour, that's May 27th through June 3rd, 2018, Elise and I are also offering several add-ons. So you have the week-long tour in Paris where we do all the fun things we always do in Paris. And then for the people who want to do more and see more and get out of Paris with us a little bit, we also offer some specific tours that you can buy individually. So there's a Versailles tour on May 25th, a Giverny tour on May 26th, and a Normandy tour on June 4, 5, 6, and 7. So that's 4 full days in Normandy over the June 6 D-Day celebrations, which means we'll get to see a lot of extras that don't happen at any other time of the year. People who want to do the add-ons don't need to do the Paris tour as well. It's all sold separately, so you can choose, I'm just going to go to Giverny with them, or just to Normandy or whatever. It took me a long time to put together this Normandy tour. I've been talking about putting it on Addicted to France for a while. The thing is, I wanted to cover all the hits. I wanted to make sure that we got to see all the best there is. But let me tell you what we're going to see. So June 4th, I pick you up at your hotel in Paris in a private car. And then we drive to the Mont Saint-Michel. Takes about 4.5 hours. And then we visit the Mont Saint-Michel. By the time we're there, it's probably going to be middle of the afternoon, spend the whole afternoon and evening there. We'll try to find a hotel where we can stay on the Mont, but because it's over the June 6 celebrations, it's looking like the hotels are already booked up on the Mont. So we might have to stay a little bit off, but that's okay. We'll have a car. We can do all of that. On June 5th, we'll drive to Sainte-Mère-Église, a lovely happening town around that time of year where a lot of the airborne activity happened. And we'll sleep at Sainte-Mère-Église. We'll visit Utah Beach and the Utah Beach Museum. Sleep at Sainte-Mère-Église. Next day, we drive to Colleville-sur-Mer. This is where Omaha Beach is, the American Normandy Cemetery, and Pointe du Hoc. So that's going to be a very busy day. It's on the D-Day celebrations. They don't necessarily all do the celebrations on the same day, but there'll be plenty of things happening around that day. Then on June 7th, we'll visit Bayeux. We'll start with the Bayeux Tapestry in the morning. We will look around Bayeux, the city, have a little bit of time for shopping, and then drive back to Paris to sleep in Paris. And this is something that happens to be really tricky without a tour because it's rural France. You need a car, and there aren't that many companies that offer it. Around D-Day celebrations, most of them are already full anyway. So if that's something you've always wanted to do, join us. It's going to be very, very fun. And if you book either the Normandy tour or the Paris tour on Black Friday this year, coming up the day after Thanksgiving, you will get a substantial discount. It's only a 24-hour sale on new orders. And I think I'm a fool for doing that because our tours are already priced really competitively. But I like you guys and I want you to enjoy France the way I do. This is the French tip of the week. The French tip of the week is for those of you who are going to be renting a car in France. And this probably won't happen, but better safe than sorry. Il y a un problème, la voiture ne démarre pas. Il y a un problème, la voiture ne démarre pas. There is a problem, the car won't start. Il y a un problème, la voiture ne démarre pas. This episode is already super long, so I'm not going to be adding up the French historical tidbit. It's a good one, though. It's on Napoleon and one of his mistresses, but I'll save that for next week. On next week's episode, I'll bring you a conversation with Matthew Gamache on his visit to Paris and Collioure in the very, very tippy bottom bit of France in the Catalan country. Thank you so much for listening. If you heard something in today's episode that someone you know would enjoy, find this episode on Join Us in France on Facebook and tag them. Have a wonderful week, and I'll talk to you next Wednesday. Au revoir. The Join Us in France Travel Podcast is written and produced by Annie Sargent and copyright 2017 by Addicted to France. It is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license.